Valorant has always been a very player-centric esport, but in 2026 it really feels like the coaches have started to take a center stage role, both in terms of the responsibility assigned to them and of course the drama that surrounds them. And I wanted to give my perspective as a former VCT coach to try and unpack some of the discussions around three specific coaches in three different regions that have garnered probably the most fan attention and backlash over the course of this season. And before we do that, I just have to give a quick sponsor shout out to Sony INZONE. And Sony INZONE is a great sponsor of this channel. They sent me their whole line of INZONE esports and gaming peripherals, and I've really enjoyed using all of them. Today, I wanted to highlight the keyboard, the KBD H75. Now, I've been a fan of my current keyboard and setup for a long time, but I've started using this one a lot for work. And honestly, the typing uh, haptic feedback that I get is really comfortable. It's nice to type out documents and stuff like that. And so I've been enjoying using this in addition to the mouse and the mouse pad and the headset and the monitor that I've been using as well. And that's the cool thing about Sony's INZONE line of peripherals is that it's all integrated and it's all kind of managed with their INZONE hub. And if you want to learn more about the Sony INZONE products, you can head over to the link in the description down below, check out some of the bundle deals, and check out more of their products. So now let's go ahead and talk about FrosT. FrosT is going to be our very first subject of debate and discussion because he has obviously driven a lot of narratives so far this season. Starting out at GE, where he replaced me and had a huge hand in the roster building of that team, came into kickoff. They looked pretty good. Obviously, just missed out on the first Masters of the year, but then they continued to build and had some very nice success in stage one, made it to the first playoffs for the organization, as well as the first international Masters tournament for GE. So that was all a huge rise, more sort of evidence that FrosT has a solid system, a good understanding of how to make a team good. And I think he really kind of captured that narrative in a big way and was getting a huge amount of, positive feedback and press surrounding him. And then all of a sudden, GE sort of they didn't really bomb out at Masters London, but they didn't perform up to maybe the expectation. They did have some tough matches, obviously losing to Leviathan, set them off on the wrong foot. But then they didn't make it out of the group stage, and all of a sudden they found themselves with what would be considered an unacceptable result for an org making it to a Masters event. Now, obviously, I think a lot of people and fans of the team would say like it was maybe not as disappointing just because they'd never made it there before. And it's kind of expected to fail at your first international event. But regardless of that discussion, shortly after the event, obviously FrosT was removed from the team. And then there was a huge amount of drama surrounding that, back and forth with the players. FrosT went on a huge podcast tour that started out, I would say, fairly diplomatic and then got kind of more and more overt in the criticism of the players on the team. And then that culminated in him joining FULLSENSE, which is his former team from Talon. And it seemed like everything was going to be on the up and up. And honestly, I thought that FULLSENSE was going to be really, really good in stage two. And I had them, at the top of my power rankings to start out. But now we find ourselves in a situation where FULLSENSE is at the bottom of the group. Not only are they at the bottom of the group, but they have lost to GE. They have also lost to FrosT's assistant coach from last year in Jovi, just recently with the RRQ match. And they have lost to Zeta Division. Now, Zeta Division has historically been one of the weakest teams in the VCT, and so these are some pretty big losses. It was super weak last week, and FULLSENSE went 0-2 in probably the most pivotal stretch of their season. So that was surprising. I picked them to win both of these games. I was still on the FULLSENSE train even after they kind of got destroyed by GE. because I figured, they'll turn it around. There was all sorts of, narratives around that GE match, and surely they will bounce back and figure out their system. But they're still seeming to kind of struggle to close out games. Now, the Zeta Division Full Sense game was close. I mean, you can see 14-12, 13-10, 13-11. Like, these are very close maps, and you had primmie destroying, dropping plus 27 and still losing. And then the RQ match, which again kind of has this extra narrative around it because of the coach relationship, and there are other things kind of going on. We see primmie on a bit of an interesting pivot to chamber on some of these maps, but obviously still has the jet in there, and he plays relatively well, but certainly not hard carry in his performance that we have kind of learned that he is capable of. Now, a huge discussion coming into this week was that why is primmie playing deadlock a bunch? And there's a lot of flame directed towards FrosT, and people, saying like, okay, why is he playing, this agent? Why isn't he just playing jet every single map? Why don't you just put him on what he was doing in stage 1, where he was, the highest rated player by far? And then they went to Masters London, and of course the team bombed out, but primmie was still like statistically the best player at the event for the group stage, and it seems so easy to everybody. And so I was curious, like a huge amount of the discussion seems to be like, is FrosT kind of like ruining primmie? Is he ruining this team that seemed to be on an upward trajectory, but is now struggling, finds themselves, certainly going to play-ins and potentially in like the bottom, like potentially as like the lowest seed in the entire Pacific region, which is not where people thought they were going to be based off of stage 1, and then FrosT rejoining the team and seeming super confident that things were going to go well. And so I was genuinely curious, because my opinion is a little bit mixed. Like, I think that, I guess, first of all, I think that FrosT is a good coach. Like, I think that's pretty obvious that he has done successful things enough times that he is clearly good at certain aspects of the game. And I think he's pretty good at building teams, and I think he's pretty good at, setting up a baseline system of performance that guarantees that you will not be like a terrible team, and you will at least be middle of the pack, if not better than that. But what I do think I've always been a little bit critical of him in doing is that I think there is a tendency to over-index on the counter part of the game. And now this is coming from somebody who also came from Dota 2 like FrosT, and does firmly believe that there are counters in the game, and that it's really important to consider like agent versus agent matchups and that type of thing. So I'm very much on the same wavelength as FrosT, but I do think that there is a certain almost like fanatical devotion to this idea that you must always do this, that has potentially caused some problems for how his teams function. And I think it's also really important to say that like this stage is a very difficult stage for Full Sense, because they went from having very little structure, I think, in terms of how the team was run. It was basically just like built around primmie, kind of like play a little bit of ranked, a little bit simple stuff, let him do all this jet things. And then FrosT comes in and wants to install a bit more structure, which I think is fine, but it was kind of a fast turnaround from stage 1 to stage 2. And I think the maybe like added complexity plus a player roster shift has potentially created a little bit of instability in the team, that then is sort of being piled upon by the fact that they have a difficult schedule. I mean, they did beat Nongshim, which was a big win. Nongshim is a good team. FrosT has historically always beaten Nongshim. They continued that pattern. Then there was like the very emotional GE game, which, I mean, as I talked about in I think it was last week's episode, when the Termi beef happened with FrosT, Talon got blown out by DRX. And so I don't know if that like extra emotional stuff is going on and causing some problems. And then they go into the Super Week and they lose two very close games against two teams that I think are kind of on the rise. Zeta has been quite good actually this stage, and I think they are getting better and better. And then RQ got Jemkin back healthy for their matchup against FulLSense. Plus, also, Jovi knows FulLSense very, very well. And so none of these games has been particularly easy. And I think that the 1-3 record that FulLSense has is a little bit of a little bit of a mirage, kind of in the same way that, like, you know, some teams will have a really good record, but they've only beaten good team, or they've only beaten bad teams, or they've only beaten teams at like specific times. And so I think FulLSense is not as bad as they look, first and foremost. And then I do also think that there is a bit of, you know, potential issues with FrosT trying to do too much too quickly with this team. And so all of that to be said is that, like, I was just kind of curious because there has been a huge narrative shift with FrosT where, like, he was sort of looked at as like, oh, he's one of the best coaches in the world based off of taking GE to their first Masters. And now I really feel like the community has kind of like changed to the exact opposite of that. Like, how is he ruining like the best player in the world's career by making him play Deadlock? And so I was just curious from all of this discussion that I actually ran some numbers. I was like, I have this huge data set, and so I ran some numbers, and I just had to know. The question that I was asking was, is FrosT's system worse for FulLSense than they were in the times that they didn't have FrosT running the team? And so I looked at the Talon days, and I looked at post FrosT return to FulLSense, and then I compared that to the kickoff and stage 1 and Masters as well. And the numbers are interesting. So primmie's performance drops significantly. That's undeniable. His performance on just like the raw statistics gets significantly worse under FrosT. However, Deadlock is not the problem. Deadlock is actually primmie's most winning agent in terms of, like, when he picks Deadlock, he wins more often than any other agent with a decent sample size. Also, primmie's best performing agent statistically is Yoru, and it was better under FrosT than it was not under FrosT in terms of his win rate and statistics. I think I'm getting this correct. I took some notes, and I'm pretty sure that this is relatively true. The bigger issue for primmie's stats is when he's flexing around too much, and then he, you know, has like random Tejo games and Sage games and all sorts of stuff. So a lot of that was kind of like before, when FrosT was trying to figure out how to get primmie integrated into the team correctly. And then over last year on Talon, pretty much every event they played, primmie got better and better and better in terms of his stats. And then FrosT left, and primmie had his best, you know, period ever, which was obviously like kickoff stage 1 into Masters London. Now, all that said, the actual win rate of the team under FrosT and not under FrosT is essentially identical. And so there's statistically no real difference between when he's there and when he's not. The big difference is primmie's like high highs, where he's, you know, like the best statistical player in the world, versus a good player who maybe is sometimes on roles that don't allow him to fully take over the game. And FrosT has kind of been very open about the fact that he doesn't want to have to rely on a single player playing exceptionally well over and over and over, because it's like a single point of failure. And sometimes when teams have that, as we saw earlier this year, even when NRG like fully countered Ospas and destroyed MIBR as a result, if all of your eggs are in one basket, then it does create maybe an easier venue to be countered. And so I think that is something that Frost like firmly believes in, that he wants the entire team to be a coherent unit that, you know, even if primmie has a bad day, they can still win based off of their system. And, you know, I totally understand that. Now, I think one thing that is worth asking about and sort of begging the question of is like, is Valorant a system game or is it a player sort of flow state game? And I think my view on this has changed a bit the more that I've coached, because initially coming into this game, you know, I had very little, if I had very little background in TAC FPS. I came like from Dota 2, which is very much a like comp system game. It's all about the chess match of the draft and how you put heroes together in super broken ways and come up with item builds that are, you know, uncounterable and stuff like that. And so that was my sort of mode of thinking coming into this game. And the more that I've coached teams and the more that I've watched, you know, young, unbelievably skilled talent play the game, the more I'm sort of in the middle ground now, where I think there is a, like, it is very important to craft comps that make sense and do things on the map that are important, but it's also really important to allow your high skilled players to do high skilled things without having to think too much about what they're doing. Like in a, you know, an action sport, let's say like basketball or baseball or any sort of like, you know, high level athletic performance, the last thing that you want your best players to be doing is thinking about what they're supposed to be doing, because they have to be moving instantaneously and making good decisions instantaneously because everything happens so quickly. And I think in a game like Valorant, where there are so many moving pieces and there is a lot less, I would say, like control over the environment because of the nature of agents and utility, and how, you know, there are these like unpunishable things like a jet just walking through a smoke with an operator instantly killing you and dashing away. Mechanics like that make it so you are rewarded for playing like bad Valorant. And when I say bad Valorant, I just mean like not tactically sound in terms of the decision making necessarily. Like in a game like Counter-Strike, for example, you probably don't want to walk through a smoke because you don't move fast enough and you essentially cannot escape if you are spotted. Whereas in Valorant, you have these, you know, movement mechanics and you have the ability to kind of like cheat things and play in weird angles because you can just suddenly teleport away. And so it's not, you know, a true tactical FPS experience. And then of course we have, you know, stuff like Neon and I mean all sorts of crazy stuff going on in the game right now, ults happening. And so I think it's really important to keep that in mind. And like I said, the more that I've sort of like interacted with the game as a coach, you know, through my time at GE, I shifted my view of this a bit, and then also, you know, working with some talented players in North America, I really am kind of starting to understand that like there's a super delicate balance. And I think it's going to depend on what team you are on and what your personnel of the team is and that type of thing. And like the more players that you have that are just like raw mechanical talent, the more you want to lean into simple stuff that allows them to just like exploit that aspect of their game. At least that's sort of my perspective at this point. So I do think that, you know, the statistics show that Frost is not like destroying this team. I think that he's a good coach, but I also do think that with a talent like primmie, it may be worth letting him off the leash a little bit more and trying not to chain the system, trying not to chain him into a system when he is really meant to kind of just like break free of the rules of the game. And I think that's kind of one thing that FulLSense was doing really well at the start of the year, which is like, I mean, there's so many rounds where primmie's just alone on half of the map and the other 4 players on the other side of the map. And you're just like, well, if they just go to primmie's site, like, how does he do anything? And then he just kills 3 people and he does it over and over and over again. And you're like, well, I guess that is just something that happens. And that's just how the game works. And so I do think that it will be interesting to see how FulSense continues their trajectory, because like I said, I do think that their matches have been particularly difficult this stage. I do think that they're probably trying to do a little bit too much too quickly, and I would be curious to see how they sort of like change their focus, knowing that they really only have a couple more games left, right? They have one more group stage game, and then they're in play-ins, and I think they're probably going to end up in the bottom bracket, although maybe they have a chance to make it into not the bottom bracket where they get 2 lives instead of just 1. Actually, I'm not even entirely sure. Okay, maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe they just always have, no, they always have 2 lives. Okay, so yeah, they've got a couple lives left. But I'd be curious, especially with Yoru kind of becoming viable again in people's eyes. I mean, primmie's Yoru's been insane. Whether they lean more into that, more into the Jet, more into the Waylay, like these agents that allow him to just do insane things because they have the escape mechanic, which allows him to just kind of like take risks that only he can actually capitalize on and escape from with an agent like that. We'll have to see. But yeah, I guess the summary of this is FrosT is not ruining this team, but there are certain things potentially that do need to change, I think, for this team to hit their maximum potential, and they don't have very much time to do it. So all that being said, let's talk about the pick'ems. Let's talk about the matches that are coming up. We had a pretty rough week last week in the pick'ems. I got both FulSense ones wrong, and then the Japanese teams got me as well with DFM beating T1. I mean, I've got some thoughts about T1. And then GE versus Genji was a very, very close match. I picked GE, and Genji obviously has continued to look very good. So going into week 4, we've got Team Secret against DFM. And for me, I think this one is pretty straightforward. I think DFM is just looking better and better. They, I think their roles look better than they have at any point this year so far, with Yatsuka off the initiator. Akame is shooting, Yatsuka's shooting, obviously Mei is good, and Kaide is also extremely good. They have, like, I think pretty high potential at this point. And if we look at the standings, they are, you know, right there. All they really have to do is win one more game and then hope that Vero loses to PaperX, which they probably will. And DFM has the head-to-head. So DFM could very likely end up in actual playoffs, and that would be massive for this organization. Also, they did have some super unfortunate circumstances that happened this week where I believe the CEO or the founder of the company passed away. So my condolences go out to the DFM family as well for that. And that could potentially also, further motivate them to, go out and do it for the deceased. And I mean, it would be a great story for Japanese Valorant if they were able to do that. So I kind of do hope that they win this game, even though I also am, at the same time kind of rooting for my former player Kelly S. But I think DFM is in a pretty good spot. Team Secret they've been a little hit or miss. They've obviously had some pretty tough games as well. I think they are probably a bit better than their record says, but I do think they are a little bit inconsistent. And this should be a pretty close game, but I'm going to go DFM. FulSense against Genji. I mean, this is a massive game. So, Genji is well on their way to playoffs. They're in playoffs, and they have looked really quite good, honestly, better than expected. I'm still a little bit concerned about the whole Ash on Neon experiment, but if we actually look at him as a player, you know, he's above a 1 rating, which is pretty good on Neon. His ADR is solid. This is 152 is a pretty good number for Neon. His first death or first kills to first deaths ratio is positive. All of these are good signs for a Neon player. And this is a player that I was like very skeptical of coming into this stage as being a duelist player, because I always thought he was kind of a passive player playing the initiator and the smokes. But I mean, potentially that was just him, you know, trying to play those roles too well, where he just thinks that, okay, I can't die, you know, on smokes, I can't die. And he's always had good aim. Like that was very obvious from the beginning when he came into this roster that he could shoot. So I guess it kind of makes sense that you put him on an agent that just wants to run around and shoot, and it kind of frees him to be able to do that. So that has been pretty amazing. And then it's also freed up Texture to do a little bit more of the texture stuff, which is that he doesn't want to be hard entering on Neon, and allows him to play the chamber and op a lot more. And that's always been Texture's superpower, which is that when you get a scope in his hands, he is one of the best in the world. And that combined with I don't know, maybe more solid, consistent IGLing plus Charon back on smokes has been huge for this team. It is surprising that they're 4-0 with a good chance to go 5-0. And I mean, the obvious pick is to just go with Gen G, but I'm kind of tempted to pick FULLSENSE here just because I feel like FULLSENSE needs this. They need this pretty badly. And I'm actually curious, what is Gen G's record against FrosT? If they played, okay, they played here. Okay, so Gen G has won every single time they've played. Now, I think a lot of these were with Munchkin. So there is that. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna go with the Gen G. Like as much as I'm trying to kind of like make the case that, you know, FULLSENSE is not as bad as they seem, I feel like Gen G is just pretty good. Gen G is pretty good. Even with primmie dropping an absolute nuke against Zeta Division, they still lost. I mean, it's gonna be hard for FULLSENSE. It seems like they have some problems, so we're gonna go Gen G there. DRX against T1 is, I mean, maybe the worst game on the slate, as weird as that is to say. Both of these teams look pretty bad. DRX had maybe a little bit of a better showing this week, but oh my goodness, T1 looks horrible. What has happened to T1? I genuinely think that they have ruined their season by doing this role switch. I think that this whole Meteor to like main duelist role, given the op every single round, is awful. Like Meteor Jet 8 and 16, that is not going to cut it, son. Like that is not going to work. And yes, DFM is better than expected, but I think that the way that they're playing around with these roles is just super weird. DH on Omen, pretty good sometimes. I just think there's kind of like too many moving parts. Like, why is Izu on Neon when Buzz was a very successful Neon? Why is DH on Sentinel when Buzz has played Sentinel and Meteor has played yeah, here. Why, this is the better one on Ascent. Why is DH on Cypher when Meteor can just play Sentinel, and then Buzz can just play Duelist as he has, and he's always been a good opper and a solid player? It doesn't make any sense to me. And I really feel like they have kind of trolled their season potentially, because they could still fairly likely make it on champs points, but at the same time, I mean, like, why are they doing this? I don't get it. They probably won't catch Nongshim based on how they're playing. I think Nongshim is definitely a better team right now. I guess you guys can't see this. 1 second. But that's what's happening. Here we go. Um, yeah, I mean, based on how they're playing right now, they're not going to catch Nongshim, so they need to turn it around quickly. I feel like they're going to miss champs. I think they're going to miss champs at this point because I don't think they're going to make top 2, and I don't think they're going to make it on points. So I don't know. I think T1's cooked. I think T1's cooked. And I'm gonna pick DRX. I'm gonna pick DRX because of that. Even though, I mean, whatever they were doing early on the stage was not working. They at least seem to be potentially headed in the right direction, and I think that T1 is like just super lost. Okay, GE and Zeta division. This is actually going to be a big, very interesting matchup. Zeta on the rise. They've had some incredible games out of Absol. Eco has looked very good as well for them. But I think I'm going to go with GE here because, first of all, they have a lot to play for. You know, if they win this, they still have a chance to make playoffs. I also think that they should be able to outshoot Zeta Division a little bit. Now, Zeta Division has been surprisingly high firepower at times. I think they actually have. That's always been like one of my big criticisms with Zeta is that they just like get outshot by teams a lot. And this stage, I think they've actually looked pretty good. But I still think that GE's firepower, like just raw ability to shoot, is one of the highest in Pacific. And I think that they should be able to not only handle Zeta's playstyle of high reliance on the Neon, but also they should be able to just win enough gun duels and clutch moments to beat them. So I'm going to go GE here. Varel against PaperX. I'm actually very tempted to pick Varel here. I don't think that they're a better team than PaperX, but I feel like PaperX, they've kind of done everything that they were, trying to do. They got Forsaken his Gecko game. They've done all that stuff. I mean, maybe at this point they decide to kind of like lock back in and go into playoffs and just, I guess it doesn't really even matter though, because they're already in playoffs. I don't think it's possible for them to fall out of playoffs, is it? No, I don't think so, because their only loss is to T1, so they should have head to head against everybody. So I mean, they don't really have anything to play for. I think I'm just gonna pick Varel because Varel cares, and also their players are crazy enough to maybe they just won't even like be phased by PaperX doing weird stuff. It'll just be I think this is gonna be a very chaotic, very weird game. Yeah, we're going to take a little flyer on Varel here. I mean, realistically, this is probably like a 60-40 PaperX, but I'm going to go with the 40 in this case. And then the final game, huge implications here for both of these teams. Nongshim really needs to win this game. They really want to make it into playoffs, so it's much easier for them to get points, so they can really lock in those points, make sure that they're the number 2 point getter, and go to champs. Also, the extra point from winning this game would go a long way to getting them to champs. I think that this game is like maybe the biggest game that Nongshim will have played this stage. And because of that, and because I am a fairly big fan of the direction that they're going, I think I'm going to pick them. But I'm very worried for them as well, because I do think that RQ is a bit of like an underrated team right now, because I think that they have kind of figured out their problems to some extent. I think that Cushy has unfortunately like fully lost confidence, so they have replaced him with Zan. Or I guess they've kind of replaced him with Monyet, because Zan came in for Monyet, and then Jemkin was sick, and then Cushy was out. And now it seems like they've settled on Monyet, Jemkin, Zan, Crazy Guy, and Xfero. And that's a pretty good roster. If Jemkin is hitting, I think RQ wins this game. And he looked pretty good last week. I'm kind of just picking Nongshim because I hope they win, but I actually almost like in my gut, I feel like this is an RQ victory and is going to send Nongshim into the play-ins where they're going to have to kind of grind it out to make it to champions. Um, Maybe I trust my gut. I think I am gonna pick RQ. I think I am gonna pick RQ as much as that hurts. I hope that I'm wrong on this one. Those are my pick'ems for Pacific. And also, before we go to the next region, let's quickly go over here. Sorry for putting you back on the screen, Mr. Frost. And let's readjust our power rankings. So we're going to drop down T1 quite a bit. I think honestly, I think they're very low. I think RQ is going to come up a little bit. I think FULLSENSE is going to drop a little bit. Gen G is obviously going to come up probably to number... Ooh. Okay, I think I'm going to do this. I'm going to pick Nongshim. I'm going to update my pick'em. And then we're going to leave Nongshim number 2, Genji 3, Global 4. And then where do we go from here? I think probably Veryl, DFM, FULLSENSE, Zeta, RQ. Oh, where is DRX in this? Man, maybe DFM is not that good. Maybe FULLSENSE is lower, man. They seem to be having some problems. No, I'm not going to overreact to DRX. We'll put DRX above RQ. I think Team Secret, unfortunately, at the bottom. Honestly, I'm dropping T1 all the way down. I hate what this team is doing. I genuinely hate what they're doing. Yeah, I think we're going to go like this. DFM can go here. I think FULLSENSE can beat Zeta. Yeah, I think FULLSENSE can beat Zeta. I'm also still not entirely sold on Veryl, even though I just said that I'm picking them to beat PaperX. But it's like, I feel like FULLSENSE would beat Veryl if they played. I think DFM would beat Veryl. I think I'm going to go like this. I think I still believe in FULLSENSE to beat a team like Veryl. And I know that FULLSENSE lost to RQ, so maybe I need to bring RQ up here. Maybe Zeta's lower than... Yeah. Okay, I mean, it's kind of a weird power ranking. This is sort of how I feel at the moment. I don't know. So I would say that this week has like shattered my perception of more teams and my concept of who is good than any other week so far this season. So that's Pacific. Let's move on to coach number 2 and the Americas region. Okay. So this obviously happened a while ago. Coach Immi was removed from the head coaching role. It seemed like maybe he was being dropped, but actually what happened is they have now swapped the assistant coach and the head coach. When I first heard about this, I was like, what are they doing? Just from knowing what it's like being on a team, especially a team that's having problems, I was very concerned this was just like, I mean, you're just setting up your new head coach for failure because you're going to have the guy that all of the players have rapport with, you know, still there, still kind of like, you know, talking to them about what they should do, but then you have sort of a new vision. But I have since watched the podcast that they put out recently, where the two coaches are there plus some of the players, and it kind of seems like, honestly, the dynamics are fairly supportive between the two. It kind of seems like Veer was there as sort of like the maybe a little bit more like macro oriented kind of like good cop, whereas Immi has just been consistently like the bad cop, sort of like focusing on all these like mistakes and all this stuff. And it really does kind of seem, at least from what they were saying, that like the younger players were really struggling with the feedback that Immi was giving them, and like I can understand that. I think there's sort of a thing with like both older coaches, myself included. I think FrosT kind of falls into this category. Um, I think yeah, just a lot of times when there's like a coach that is very like strict on mistakes, it can kind of cause issues with like the younger generation of players in Valorant, because I think, especially for somebody like Immi, and I'm really just kind of like talking out of my ass here because I have no idea what the dynamics are on this team, but Immi is like a former Counter-Strike player and coach. I assume that he's very particular in how he thinks about things. I'm sure he's very like micro mechanic focused because of that Counter-Strike background. And I'm sure that when he sees, a player take some sort of risk that he thinks is dumb, he's probably like getting upset about that type of thing. And when you have a coach constantly telling you about all these little micro mistakes that you're making, and you're an 18 or 19-year-old player that has like essentially just made it into the pros through having fun and being a zoomer and just running around and shooting, it can really kind of uh, rub you the wrong way and like shatter your confidence and make it hard for you to play well. Um, I've experienced this in my own coaching experience, where I've had players or teammates tell me that like, I think maybe you're too harsh. And like, I think that that is something that I've had to learn, and that a lot of coaches have to learn in the Valorant space. Kind of again, sort of talking about this subject that I was discussing about FrosT, where sometimes you kind of just like have to take a little bit of the shackles off. You have to be a little bit more um, rock and roll in how you think about the game. It's like less rules, less focus on the fundies. Not to the point where the team has no structure and you're making dumb mistakes, but a lot of these kids are playing the game for fun, and when they have fun playing the game is when they're the best. And so if you remove all of the fun from the game because you're constantly trying to play too well or too perfectly or too fundamentally correctly, it can really not only make the game unfun, it can make them very stuck in their own head of like, I can't mess this up because I don't want to get yelled at by my coach. And at least from the podcast, it kind of sounds like that is something that was happening, which I would not be surprised about, just based off of, Immi is an older coach who has this background, and their team is very young and inexperienced outside of Zelsis, basically. And so, I mean, I guess Oxy has a decent amount of experience, but like the younger players at the very least may have been struggling with stuff like that. So I think that that is an interesting kind of dynamic and story to watch. And obviously they did get a win against Crew in this last week. And I mean, the amount of negativity that has been directed at Immi has been pretty insane. I mean, I definitely have been critical of some of the decisions and responses that he's had as well. But I also just want to kind of like expand on the coaching experience of sometimes the factors like that are impacting your performance kind of snowball out of control. So just as an anecdotal experience from me last year, when I was first starting coaching on the team, I was very optimistic and happy, and like everything was, even if we had like a bad day of practice or even if we lost a game, it was always like, that's fine. Like we have growth to do. Like we'll fix these mistakes. Everything's going to be fine. And then, one thing happens after another, visa issues, problems with the team, pressure from management, unfortunate circumstances of certain things occurring. And then by the time you come out on the other side, it's sort of like that, that meme of like the World War II soldier with like PTSD staring at the camera. You kind of come out the other side and you're just like, how can I ever be happy? There's so many mistakes to fix. I'm working so hard and just so many things are happening and we're losing and everybody's depressed. And I show up to work and everybody is like mad and angry. And like, you just end up kind of in this cycle of just like, yeah, it can just kind of get rough. And so I don't know if that's happening for this team, but it is something that can happen, certainly. And the pressure is pretty immense, and so it can definitely just like cause things to spiral. And from the podcast that they made, it sounds like Immi feels way better not having all of that pressure at this point. And Veer is obviously doing something right because they got their first win. So I just kind of wanted to like talk about this one as well, just because I think that it's very easy to point fingers and hate on coaches and people in the scene. But most of the time the story is a little bit broader. And it's not to say that, Immi is secretly the best coach in the world. I mean, I think that probably all the coaches that I'm going to talk about would readily admit that they have made a bunch of mistakes. Because that's just how it works. You just make a bunch of mistakes and you try to do your best to not make them and fix stuff. But I do think that piling all of the blame on, one player or one coach, constantly asking for them to be fired, that type of stuff, it's just like, I mean, it's just the internet. It's unfortunately just the internet. And it's usually not the correct story or interpretation. Man, I've been really thinking about making this sort of like behind the scenes as a coach documentary thing. I have a bunch of like behind the scenes footage from last year of me giving talks to the team and stuff like that. And I really want to make this thing. It's so much work and I keep putting it off. But maybe I have to make it after this year and after seeing sort of like the discussions around the community. Anyway, let's move on to Americas. Let's talk about the pick'ems, the matches. We had a pretty good week. We missed on Cloud9 beating Crew, and we missed on Furia beating Envy. We had two of our winless teams getting wins. Shout out to both teams. We did everything else correct. I feel like Americas has been by far the easiest to predict so far, and we'll see how that holds up for week number 4. Energy beating Lev was obviously a pretty big one as well. And then I think 100 Thieves, Sentinels was also kind of a banger game. I mean, Sentinels, unfortunately, lost both of their matches. Both of them were quite close, had a bunch of emotions, a bunch of interesting storylines. They had a tough week, kind of like FULLSENSE, honestly. But I would say Sentinels probably had the better opponents that beat them. Anyway, week number 4, EG versus Furia. Furia seems to be on struggle street right now. We had an interview with Koala Noob, just kind of like dumping the team's problems out into the open. I understand. I had a couple of moments like that last year in my press conferences, but it does not sound good at Furia right now. And EG, they're not an exceptionally good team, but they're not terrible. And they did just lose to 2 very good opponents. I think they'll probably beat Furia. I think that they'll hopefully maybe not lean into the Digizin veto too much and just play him on stuff that he can op on a bunch easily. And I feel like an operator against a team that's in chaos should be pretty good. Energy versus Envy. I mean, this one's kind of fun. Like, it's a little tempting to just go with Envy, like Demon 1 revenge game. But honestly, Energy is just too good. So we can just pick them and move on. 100 Thieves, Cloud9. I mean, Cloud9 might be on the upper trajectory, finally. But 100 Thieves is just way ahead of them. 100 Thieves should win pretty easily. I think they're just way too good. G2 versus Loud. I think this is also fairly straightforward. G2 has definitely kind of found their identity, I think. And Loud seems to be, like they did beat Cloud9, but I think they're just a little bit too chaotic of a team to beat a team as good as G2 is. Sentinels, I think, will take care of business against Crew. I think that Crew is like, they're just done. I really don't think this team is doing anything. Unfortunately, I think they have Yeah, I think they've been a little bit screwed by the whole visa thing at the beginning of the year, but then they had that momentum, and then I think they've kind of just like lost their way. Unfortunately, not to put too much blame on any one player, but Dante Deus has like one of the worst first kill to first death ratios I've ever seen, which might be partially his fault and also might be partially the system, the team system's fault. But it is really bad. I think it's like 0.22. So he's literally dying like 4 times for every first kill so far this season. Something like that. Which is like you're not going to win any games if you're duelist. Your entry player is dying 4 times for every first kill. It's not going to work. So Sentinel should win this. I feel like Sentinels has been playing relatively well, even though they did lose 2 games last week. Lev versus MIBR is very, very interesting. MIBR is definitely on the rise, but their games recently have been pretty easy, and I don't think they've looked like insanely good. They've looked good, but they haven't looked like a super team. Lev obviously just lost for the first time in a while, which, you know, some teams might have a little bit of confidence shaken from that, but I mean, this was a super close, really, really good game, hard fought. There's no quit in Lev. I think that Lev probably bounces back here. I could see this go either way. I think it's probably like a 55-45 type of game um, in Lev's favor. So it's not like a definite Lev win, but I think they're just really good, man. They're really good. EG versus Energy, I think again. I mean, it's an interesting one with Ethan against Potter for sure, but again, I think the Energy is just too good. I really think Energy is an insanely good team. And they have some unique stuff they're doing as well on Summit, and so far nobody's been able to figure them out. 100 Thieves will take care of business against Loud, so maybe this is not really that interesting of a week again, and we'll get the real intrigue and plans. Um, those are my pick'ems for Americas. Let's move on to our third and final coach, and that is Mr. ENGH. Mr. ENGH, FNATIC, lost to Heretics 13-0 after having a huge lead on Summit and then not being able to win any defensive rounds, basically. Getting rolled. There's been a lot of criticism directed towards ENGH recently. Obviously, he's a Masters winning coach long time ago. A lot of people I know, like other coaches, rate him highly. I know that his time at KC has not been particularly good, and people were kind of surprised that he got a job at FNATIC. And a lot of people being like, "Why did they let go of Milan when they were doing a pretty good job with him?" And suddenly the team is really kind of struggling to find results. And this is another one of those situations where I feel like the story is a little bit more nuanced than people are thinking about. Um, this is a team in FNATIC that I think at the beginning of the year was set up really well. I think that VCT was just another example of FNATIC's like super good scouting system where they always just seem to find these players that are just I've never heard of them because I'm not in the VCL leagues watching every single match in Europe, and all of a sudden, they bring in just another player, like another player out of the FNATIC, talent factory. Heroes moved on to Navi and looks like one of the best players. And it just seems like every player that comes through the FNATIC system, they're passing them off to Vitality, Durka, Chronicle. Yeah, go ahead. Just keep replacing them with good talent. And I think VCT was just another one. And unfortunately for him, the health issues popped up and they had to kind of finally just decide, all right, we are going to go with a new player. And they went out and they got Cloud from Giants, which seems like kind of a weird signing considering that he's like been a recon scans player for a long time, and FNATIC obviously has Crashies, who's never really played anything but that. And I think that it might not have been like the best role signing, but I think if you had to kind of look at the pool of players that was out there, um, and now I obviously I have no idea what the did Cloud have a buyout at Giants that they had to go pay for? Were there other people that were maybe available? I don't know. It happened at kind of a weird point in the season where I'm sure that a lot of the tier two teams are not going to be giving up their players because they're kind of grinding for the playoff spot or the play-in spot. And so maybe, maybe they wanted a tier two player, but all of the buyouts were set at like, $1 million because none of these tier two teams wanted to give up their roster because it could completely ruin their season if all of a sudden they get poached, right? And so maybe FNATIC shopped around and Giants was like, well, our season's not doing so well, and we'd like to see Cloud have some success, and he's got the Russian connection with ENGH. Maybe everything just kind of worked out that Cloud was like the best option that they had. Cloud's a very good player, and so FNATIC's just like, okay, well, we can teach him to do the stuff that we need him to do. We have a very good system. We bring him in, and I mean, he's looked good. Cloud has looked good, even though FNATIC is not winning. So it's not like they signed a bad player by any means. I wanted to look at this I wanted to look at this quote from ENGH briefly because I thought it was kind of an interesting and illuminating thing. I'm sure that this will probably get quite a bit of negative press as well, just because that's how the internet works. That's how Valorant subreddit and Twitter and stuff works. Is they're going to read this and say, so ENGH says, when I joined FNATIC, I thought the work I would do would be different from what I'm doing now. I thought I would work more on macro play and topics handled by the head coach. However, I saw incredible synergy between Boaster and Desmo, who is their assistant coach and has been their assistant coach for the whole year. That's why I'm working more like an assistant coach. I think they know their game, how we should play, and what we should prefer very well. So I'm mostly providing advice. Now, that sounds a little bit crazy. Like they hired this head coach who has, a long history of being a head coach. And he's like, well, I'm kind of just the assistant coach. But what people have to understand is that if you were to bring in a coach in the middle of the season into an existing system with players that are already all bought into how the team is playing, and then the head coach wants to completely change everything to fit their vision, that is going to make the team horrible. Like, there is no chance that that is going to work in the time frame that exists to do those changes. ENGH might see the game fairly differently than FNATIC, but if he wants to teach Boaster how to call in his system and Alfier how to play in his system and Kayak, like, that's an off-season plus worth of work. And so sometimes you just need more eyes. You need a specific skill set. And you might be asking, like, okay, well, why did they even, change Milan to ENGH? I don't know. I have no idea why that happened. But I think what ENGH is saying here actually makes a lot of sense. I had kind of a similar situation with Ascend. My last year with Ascend, where I was a content creator, I was coaching assistant coaching their Game Changers team, and then in their sort of last push to try and make Ascension, NBS was the coach. Now, obviously, with 100 Thieves, he was the head coach. The team was kind of struggling, and I was asked to come in and help the team. And I think there was definitely some potential issues that could have arisen if I just came in and was like, hey, I'm gonna fix all of this stuff, NBS, step aside, I got this, right? And so that's not what I did. As soon as I was told, like, okay, you're gonna come in, because this was not NBS asking for more help. This was like Ascend was like, we need more help. And so, they kind of just made the decision, all right, we're gonna bring in another coach. And I'm sure they talked to NBS about it, but it was not really like him, hey, like, go out and get Donnie, go out and get Elevated to come help. It was like Ascend was making the decision. And so as soon as that decision was made, I immediately messaged NBS and I was like, "Hey man, um, what do you need me to do?" Like, I'm not here to step on your toes in any way, shape, or form. We have a game in like 3 days. I'm now your assistant. Um, just tell me anything that you need me to do. Like, I am happy to do whatever. I'm happy to contribute as much or as little as you need. I don't want to change anything that you're doing. I'll give you some suggestions. I'll give you notes. Everything that happens for the team will just run through you. You are the head coach. I want that to be perfectly clear. I don't want there to be any sort of like weird stuff between us. I'm just like another pair of eyes and another pair of hands to get stuff done. And so that was our relationship, and I think it was probably the right way to do that. And that could potentially be sort of what ENGH is sort of expressing here, which is that, you know, he already sees dynamics that he thinks are good in place, and he just wants to kind of be like another set of tools that those systems can use to get stuff done. Now, obviously, FNATIC's results have not been good since he joined, but I don't necessarily even think that that's his fault. Um, Maybe part of it is, I don't know, obviously, but I think that there's also probably a lot of, just look at like what has happened to FNATIC this year. Like, if we just pull up FNATIC and we go to their transactions, you know, okay, they bring in VCT, they lose their assistant coach who was very impactful last year. They bring in another assistant coach. VCT goes inactive. They kind of get their kickoff screwed. They bring in a sub. Then Milan leaves or gets kicked. I don't really know. They bring in ENGH. Then their sub they actually had like two different subs, right? Because VCT was sick and then they weren't sure how long it was going to be and blah, 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 blah. They've had a lot of chaos. There's been a lot of chaos in this team's roster. A lot of uncertainty. Is this guy coming back? Do we need another sub? Um, I think Desmo played a game for them, right? Yeah, he played against Giants and they won. Like, as somebody who had a lot of roster chaos last year on my team, even just switching a player in and then back out and then back in and then back out is going to really impact the team. This is a game, again, kind of going back to this whole thing about, you know, coaches impacting teams and maybe being too harsh for young and upcoming players. This is a game that is very, sounds kind of dumb, but it's very vibes based. And just the chaos of the players coming in and out can really shift things, and it can feel like a totally new team, even though one player has changed. And so I think that FNATIC has had certainly more chaos than they've had in a while on this team, and I think that between the different players and coaches and stuff, it's just been too much for them to really expect stability in their results. I think that they've done a fairly admirable job handling all of the chaos in their roster, and it's now just kind of culminating in, you know, some poor results in the group stage. Like, this is definitely the worst group stage that they've had. Minus 38 is insane. Obviously, some of that is the 13-0 to Heretics. I think losing to Eternal Fire was a pretty big one. I mean, but this was close, right? This is a back and forth crazy game on Summit, and then I think they've kind of just mentally collapsed and got blown out on Split. Honestly, what it seems like to me. It just is another example of, like, this is a team that is not stable right now, and kind of understandably so, they're not stable because they just haven't been a stable team. Also, back-to-back super weeks. I mean, EMEA doing back-to-back super weeks is crazy. This is a team that has kind of been built on like weekly prep, and then all of a sudden this year the scheduling is different. I don't know. I'm making a lot of excuses for FNATIC, but I guess the point that I'm trying to make is I think that there's more factors than just a coach change that is affecting this team. So yeah, let's talk about the playoffs. Now, just full disclosure, I have not had any time to watch the tier 2 VCL teams. It's very hard to keep up with 4 VCT leagues, regions, so I don't have time to watch tier 2 at the moment, except for occasionally. So I'm going to be kind of guessing with this bracket and these pick'ems, but I do have a little bit of insight. Wait, am I not able to do pick'ems here? Can I do pick'ems on the bracket? The play-ins? That's annoying. Okay, well, let's do it for fun with Epic Pen. Let's do it for fun with Epic Pen. Since can I really not do this on VLR? Weird. Guess there is no pick'em. Okay. Anyway, let's see. So Eintracht Frankfurt has one of my former players from Ascend on it, Musashi, the IGL, I believe. He was the IGL. And actually another player from Ascend, Monster. These guys have played together before. They've got pretty good synergy. And this team has been very successful, actually, this stage. And really for this year. They've had a very nice run recently, which means that they're in pretty good form. Seems like they're kind of destroying people. And that's definitely a good sign going into play-ins. And honestly, I could see them beating Giants since Giants has had kind of a rough season. I think I'm going to pick Eintracht Frankfurt to go forward. So let's go EF here. Not Eternal Fire. Oops, I need to make this a little... we'll say... Wait, where is Eternal Fire? Eternal Fire is here. Okay, we're going to go Ein. So Giants is going to lose. Going to go down here. I actually don't know where they're going to go. Do they get flipped to the bottom? I have no idea. This is going to be a mess. Okay. This might be too much of a mess for me to actually do in any coherent way, but we'll try. So we're going to say Eintracht Frankfurt beats Giants. I think Na'Vi will beat Job Life. Unfortunately for Job Life, another one of my players from Ascend, Chiwa, didn't get his visa. So Job Life having to do another sub late in the year. They had to do it last year as well, I believe, when he was on the team. Or was it BBL? Anyway, Chiwa continues to be plagued by visa issues, unfortunately. But Job Life was good. But I think Na'Vi will be good enough to beat them. Pacific versus Reborn is going to be very interesting. This is a Turkish team, all Turkish team. Batunax coming in. Was in tier 1, had kind of a rough stint in tier 1, but has seemingly kind of reinvented himself. I think I even heard that he might be IGLing this team. Kachao has been on my leaderboard of prospects recently. So I don't know. I feel like this one could be kind of a fun one. I'm gonna pick Reborn. I'm gonna say this is another tier 2 team. Oh my goodness. Okay, so Eintracht picking to win. Navi's gonna win this. I'm gonna go Reborn winning this game, beating Pacific. And then FNATIC versus Enterprise. I mean, Enterprise is like they've been dominating tier 2, it seems like. They get a tough match. I mean, I feel like a lot of people are going to be picking Enterprise just because FNATIC seems to be kind of like on the down. But I'm going to go FNATIC. I can't believe FNATIC will go out like this. And so I'm going to go FNC. Now, I don't know what the rest of this bracket is going to look like because I can't really predict without knowing how these brackets move. So let's just go to like the 4 teams that are going to move on into playoffs. I'm going to go ahead and send Foot through. I think Foot will make it. I think they're pretty good. I think I'm going to go ahead and send Heretics through. As much as I hate continuing to predict Heretics, I think Heretics will make it. Gentlemates, I mean, Martine has been in insane form, hasn't he? He's been in really good form. But they've been kind of inconsistent even with the crazy form. I think we're going to go ahead. We're going to put FNATIC through in the last spot. And then this spot is going to go to a tier 2 team. Now, is it going to be Frankfurt or is it going to be Enterprise? I'm going to go with Frankfurt. I'm going to go Eintracht Frankfurt makes it into the playoffs. I'm going to believe in Musashi and Monster. And those are going to be my 4 teams that make it into playoffs. And then once playoffs happens, I think I'll be able to do another episode to predict that. So that is the story of EMEA this week. Let's go ahead and quickly talk about China. China, we've got play-ins coming up. They start in a day. We do have a pick'em here. So let's go ahead and do pick'ems. So real quick, A team. I guess I should quickly just talk about the 2 teams. Who is A team and who is keep best? So A team is a team, as their name says, and they have several players that were in tier 1 at some point. Aaron, I believe, was on Tyloo. Monk was on JDG at the beginning. No, he was on All Gamers and then Nova. He was actually a player that I was fairly high on coming into the China VCT League starting. I think he has really good aim. I have not seen him play since, 2 years ago, so I don't know if he's still good. Dingwei, I believe, was also on DRG briefly. They've got a Korean coach, which is kind of interesting. Curious where this guy came from. Wow, he's been on a billion teams. Berserkers is a North American tier 2 team. Revenant Indian team. Cerberus was Indonesian or Vietnamese. Vietnamese, I think. Got a Thai team, I believe. Oh, no. Okay, so he's been in the Vietnamese scene for a while. So Cerberus is Vietnamese. This is also a Vietnamese team. Okay, so he's been in SEA for a while. Came over to North America briefly. Interesting. Very strange career path, but maybe he's good. This team probably won't do too much, honestly. They did knock out Simon and Juicy, kind of surprisingly, but I think that's probably going to be where the run ends. Keep Best Gaming on the other side is an interesting one as well. Akuman was on DRG, and then they've got a Russian import and a Russian coach, which has been working wonders for XLG. Don't know too much about this guy, Nate. But Sid Beast WoW was playing in, looks like, the MENA region for a bit on Nazar, and then Al-Qadsiya. And then Aksuji was, playing with Redgar at some point? Okay. Interesting rosters. Will Keep Best Gaming do much? I mean, I think it's possible. Definitely possible. Titan's been pretty rough. But let's go ahead and just do our pick'ems real quick. So Trace against a team. Ooh, man. Trace has been bad. Trace has been pretty bad this year. Can a team beat them? Can a team beat them? I'm going to go with Trace. I feel like Trace's structure should be able to beat a bunch of tier 2 players, but I have not seen a single game that a team has played. Maybe they're sick. Maybe they're good. We're going to go Trace. Either way, neither of these teams are going to make it all the way through. Titan Esports against Keep Best. I mean, Titan Esports, I feel like they were close to being decent in stage 2. Surely they win this. I think they win this. I'm going to be boring and pick the tier 1 teams over the tier 2 teams here. Although that being said, like, these guys have been grinding through the bracket, so they've been playing a bunch. Maybe Titan Esports comes in cold. We'll just go Titan. We'll be boring like that. Okay, I'm going to pick a team, actually. I'm going to pick a team over Trace, just because Trace was so bad this year. They were so bad. Okay, not that it really matters. All Gamers will beat them. JDG FPX. I think FPX is just, it is Berlin Revenge Arc potentially, but I'm going to go FPX. I think they're a bit of a better team. EDG should beat Titan Esports. Wolves versus DRG. I'm going to go with Darion. I'm going to go with my boy Darion. Hopefully he wins that. DRG will beat Trace. I can see Keep Best beating JDG. Sure, they'll knock him out. Oh no, then we get the two tier 2 teams. That's kind of a bummer. Well, if that's the case, we'll pick DRG over Titan. We'll go Keep Best beat them once. So I think they'll probably beat them again. Because I think they beat them 3-0 in a best of 5. Okay, all gamers against FPX. I think I'm going to go FPX here. I am not super sold on all gamers at the moment. EDG against Wolves. I want to go Wolves. I want Darion to make it. I want Darion to make it really badly. I think I'm going to go EDG though. And then we have EDG going through upper final. DRG, I think, will beat all gamers. Wolves will beat Keep Best. Get a rematch. I'm going to go Wolves. I don't know what's going on here. So we're just going to try and submit this, I guess. Hopefully that pick worked. So we've got Wolves qualifying, Edward Gaming qualifying. Those are my picks. That is the episode. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next week. Potentially, I might have to delay next week's episode because I'll be traveling. We'll see you soon. See you soon.